Hey there, welcome back to another edition here with R. John Robbins. I'm Dre Redfern, and this one is going to be a little bit more informal than maybe we've done some of the previous editions in this series. R. John and I were talking as the film crew were getting set up about different aspects of running a small law firm, being the solo practitioner especially. So we want to have something
getting your ass kicked as a small business entrepreneur
and what it takes to stay with it.
And not quit.
And not quit.
And not make all the excuses that people hide out behind.
And so this one we're going to do a little bit more informal. We don't have a set agenda like we have previously, so a little bit more dialogue back and forth of various aspects that you could probably relate to regardless of where you are in your solo career. That I think maybe we can shed some light on different perspectives in order to either give you that extra bump or that little extra bump in your step, or encourage you to keep going down that path, whatever that may be. So John, let's dive into it from the aspect of when you were running your practice.
Yeah, when my law firm was running me into the ground, you mean?
Yeah, because we're not taught the business elements, in law school or really pretty much any white collar profession. The business, the sales, all of the metrics we've talked about previously, and you're in it. You're in it, and you don't feel like you're in it to win it. You're in it to survive. Just give the brief sort of overview of what that, where you were at in that point of time, what got you there, and then we can talk about sort of the next steps and what you did to get out of it.
What we were talking about before the crew moved everything around and you said, hey, let's just capture this, was actually a different part of my life, right? Because there's the part of my life where I graduated from law school, I opened up my own law firm, and I fell on my face because I didn't know anything about the business of how to run a law firm. Then there's a part of my life where I got recruited and I spent 4 years with the Florida Bar's Law Office Management Assistance Service, and I worked with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of solo and small law firm owners on every aspect of starting, marketing, managing, buying, selling, growing, blah, 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 a law firm.
All the things.
Then there's the part of my life where I worked with big law firms for a few years. And then there was the part of my life, which is really what we were talking about, which whenever people tell this story, they always think this part of it is at the beginning of the story, but it's really several steps in, because I failed to follow my own advice about how to run a business. So it's like the shoemaker without shoes. So there I was, starting how to manage a small law firm in around 2006, 2007. I went to go work at the Florida Bar in 1999. I was there from 99, 2000, 2001. I was there it was actually almost 3.5 years, 4 years just about. Then I went to go work for a big accounting firm, one of the largest independent accounting firms in the Southeast, where we created a practice area, basically an advisory practice area for solo and small law firms. Then I got recruited by their consultant and worked for big firms, 75, 100 lawyer firms. Then I started how to manage a small law firm. And that's when Allie got sick. Allie's my wife. And because I had not put the kind of processes and systems and procedures and financial control, because I had not put the infrastructure in place, instead of the business continuing to run without me, instead of the marketing continuing to work without me, the sales continuing to convert without me, the work product continuing to be produced and delivered without me, the bills continuing to get sent out, received, and billed, without me. Instead of the 7 main parts continuing to function without me, the whole thing fell apart. And, we went from earning, a couple $100,000 a year income, which was, pretty good at the time for me, I thought, based on where I was in my life. Fast forward 18 months, we're moving out of our condo because we lost it to foreclosure. I'm driving around in a truck with flat tires because I didn't have money to buy new tires. I'm scraping. I mean, literally scraping up money. You know, that drawer in the kitchen everyone's got with all the junk. You know, I'm like going through that drawer, you know, some weeks to try to scrounge up enough money to buy grocery money. I mean, literally, and people think that's the beginning of the story, but that wasn't the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story, I had all kinds of success. The problem is it all fell apart so fast. As soon as something went wrong in my life, I mean, it falls apart fast without the kind of infrastructure that I'm now so, I mean, this is why I'm so militant. This is why I'm so insistent. This is why I'm so unapologetic in saying you've got to put these procedures in place out of love and respect and care for your family, your clients, and just yourself.
I I can relate to a lot of that because, and we've shared this.
I know you
this
can. This
story
is how our
before.
friendship began.
Exactly. I mean, at this point, I'm an owner of 3 businesses.
3 successful businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, and but it wasn't like that. You know, we chatted briefly. You know, my wife and I in 2015 found ourselves in a very widely publicized lawsuit as plaintiffs. We ended up winning.
It was a hollow victory, though, because you lost, I think, conservatively speaking, millions of dollars of opportunity costs.
1,000%. Like this was one of my primary business was getting up and off the ground. Was when all of this happened. So as like similar to you with getting how to manage up and off the ground. So for me, it was, I ended up putting, luckily I had good credit and multiple credit cards. I had nearly $500,000 on my Amexes.
In legal fees.
Yeah. to cover all of the costs. I was making payroll on the Amexes to try and make it all happen. And, you know, hit a point where the runway ran out. So I had to sell my car and my wife's, you know, carbon fiber bike to make the mortgage. It was one of those things, like, I look back and you probably couldn't pay me enough to go back and live that again, but I'm so glad that I did it.
I say the same thing.
And I got through it.
You know, Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers, he talks about some of the most successful people in the world, they have dyslexia. So he interviewed some people who are wildly successful and they happen to all have dyslexia. And they all say that their dyslexia was such a challenge, but they had to overcome it, and they credit that with helping them figure out unique ways of approaching things that help them rise to the highest levels in their professions and industries. Yeah. And they all credit their dyslexia with developing that superpower. And then when he interviewed them and he said, so based on that, would you want your children to have dyslexia so that they could develop these superpowers too? And every one of them said, no way. It was too painful. It was too excruciating. And I have the same thing. I mean, we lost our house to foreclosure, the whole story, you know. And would I want my son to go through that? And the answer is hell no. You know, I work my ass off. We make responsible financial decisions so that he never has to experience that. But there's a part of me that also feels like, man, how is he ever going to know what he's made of if his back isn't ever up against the wall like mine was? And, you know, I just, what you were saying was so interesting because you guys are I think you're the largest legal malpractice insurance agency in the country, if not the largest, probably one of the top 2 or 3.
Yep.
I mean, highest rated, all that kind of great stuff. I mean, you guys are a really big deal. But I think a lot of people assume that, like, oh yeah, well, Daniel's Head can do this because Daniel's Head's doing this. And they don't understand that Daniel's Head can do this because you and your team were willing to do the things you were willing to do back when success wasn't exactly a foregone conclusion. Am I right?
100%. There's also an element where Daniel said it's a bit different because it was started in the 50s and by 2 other people. So there's a couple iterations of the company. Not saying the company hasn't been through challenges, but it was a family business. So my dad bought it, and then from that point forward, my brother and I did a lot of the marketing and management of things, and things just grow over a period of time. But for that company in particular, I don't relate as much to the struggle because over a period of basically 60 plus years, those controls and things were put in place through enough trial and error.
So that when you had family emergencies, so that when you had family who had to disappear for 30, 60, 90 days with emergency access only, the infrastructure kept it going.
Correct.
I didn't have that infrastructure when I had these problems with how to manage, which is why we wound up going broke and having to live off of Allie's art.
Yep.
Because Allie was fortunately a very talented artist, and we lived off her paintings for
Like this one right here.
that's one. Well, that's not a painting, but it's on a mug.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you go into our home, all the paintings that you see all over the house are G. Clay reprints because all the originals were sold. That's how we lived for years. We lived off her art before How to Manage really got going. But look, I mean, I don't think that anyone in your audience really is very interested in hearing our story.
Yeah.
But I do think it's really interesting because there's so many struggling law firm owners today who think that the reason that another law firm owner has a successful law firm is because that successful law firm owner got lucky. Or they think that successful law firm owner has something going for them that the struggling law firm owner just isn't blessed with.
Yep.
Or they think that the struggling law firm owner, or that the successful law firm owner just was born and has this, born and likes to do the things that have to get done to make a law firm successful. And if I liked documenting processes and systems and procedures, well then, I could be successful. He's lucky. I had someone, so when I launched How to Manage a Small Law Firm, when we were getting going, LexisNexis, Microsoft, Ruby Receptionist, LawPay. If I had known you back then, maybe Daniel's Head would have joined as a sponsor. But I went out on the national CLE speaking tour. And 2011, 12, and 13, I spent more nights on the road doing CLE talks about the business of how to run a law firm with bar associations all over the country than I spent at home. And I'm 5'7". I literally had someone tell me, I'm not exaggerating, that, well, you're lucky. You were able to do all of that, Arjan, because you can fit into the airplanes more easily than me. This is that was the difference. That made the difference. That's the reason why I was able to get myself booked, get myself to leave my family, get myself in front of an audience. I mean, I don't want to make this about me. I don't think you want to make this about you.
I think it's good to give a sense of foundation or elements of like to what you said previously. You can't judge your beginning by someone else's middle. But we've all had.
Well, you
that.
can. You just shouldn't.
You just shouldn't.
Yeah.
That we've all been there. So I think we're making it relatable to a small law firm owner who's in it.
Everyone who has a successful law firm started off without a successful law firm. I mean, there's a few people who are like you, who maybe their mother or their father or someone in their family started the law firm and handed it over to them. But I'm telling you, I mean, I've worked with tens and tens of thousands of some of the most successful, moderately successful, not successful at all, struggling law firm owners from all different walks of life. And the minority of successful law firm owners inherited their firm. Most owners of successful law firms today started the firm from nothing. And, they started because sometimes they had a beautiful vision and an aspiration, and this is usually what they talk about on stage when they're telling their story publicly. But I can tell you from having worked with thousands and thousands of them that a lot of the times their main motivation is the desire to live indoors and eat food. Survival.
Yeah.
I need to survive. And the way they survived was by helping people solve legal problems and getting paid to do so. It's a very simple business when you break it down to those fundamentals.
I think that one of the elements that is worth touching on is meeting people where they're at. Because I know that having run multiple businesses, at this point I own 2 businesses outright. One I have business partners on. They didn't all have employees and teams now, but it wasn't always that way. So when you're getting going and you're in the thick of it and you are struggling, you don't know whether you need to hire the team, you don't know about the systems or processes or procedures, you're trying to do it all and muddle it all together, the inclination for a lot of people is this worth it? Should I keep going?
Yeah, well, what I always tell people, and I didn't coin this phrase, someone else said it, I'm not telling you it's going to be easy, I'm telling you it's going to be worth it, right? I mean, I live a blessed life. I get to live a life that is inaccessible and unfamiliar to the vast majority of the world's population. From the house, the car, the way I travel, the domestic, all of that, right? I mean, I'm blessed. And it's not easy. It wasn't easy to build this. It was, I have so much respect and so much gratitude and so much appreciation for the man who made this possible for me. And what I'm referring to is the 38-year-old version of myself, right? The 38, 39-year-old version of myself, the 40-year-old version of myself who he was broke, he was desperate, he was scared, he was intimidated, he had the world, or not the whole world, but a lot of the world against him. He had unpopular views. He had an untested business model. He had a lot going against him, right? And a lot of people yelling at him, just get a job, just get a job, just get a job. And somehow he found it within him to make decisions and keep making decisions and keep making decisions and keep making decisions, little by little by little by little by little, figuring this thing out. In 2009, the first real year of How to Manage, and this is what we started talking about with the art, in 2009, the business only grossed $75,000. Gross. That's not, I made $75,000. It was, I grossed $75,000. We literally lived on Allie's art. We had to sell paintings to pay the rent. Then it went to $200,000, and we still lived off of her art in 2010. And then in 2011, we were able to grow that to $600,000 in gross revenue. That was the first year we actually could take any money out of the business, right? That was the first year in 3 years we took a vacation. That was the first year in 3 years that I mean, that was the year I got new tires. I mean, it was crazy, right? And then 2012, the business grossed $1 million. And in 2012, when the business grossed $1 million, I remember we had members of our family who were sophisticated people, not like ignorant peasants, educated, sophisticated people who said, congratulations, you're a millionaire. It's like, no, I'm still basically broke. The business grossed $1 million. That doesn't mean anyway, now it's different, right?
If you were to go back and tell your old self something, because I think this is good, because there's going to be a lot of people watching this that are in the thick of it. If you were to go back and tell your old self something, what would be the 2 or 3 things of advice that you would tell the old version of yourself?
1, I made this harder on myself than it had to be because I confused the definition of the word expense with the definition of the word expensive. And I was reluctant, afraid to incur certain expenses because I told myself it was too expensive. And it turned out that the lower cost thing was much more expensive than the higher cost thing.
Yep.
And more specifically, I'm talking about staff. The $50,000 a year assistant who makes you miserable because they do a shit job versus the $100,000 assistant who frees up 20 hours a week of your time and allows you to operate 3 times more efficiently with a much better frame of mind. That extra $50,000 is not more expensive. It's just it's more expense.
Yep.
And I was afraid to really, had I invested in the caliber of the team that I've got now 5 years ago, I would be 10 years ahead of where I am right now. Had I invested in the caliber of team that I have now 10 years ago, I'd have been 20 years ahead of where I am right now. It's literally that much of a geometric progression, and it is that extreme. It's mind-boggling to think about. If I take the growth from 10 years ago to today, and I extrapolate it to 10 years from now, the numbers are so big that I can't even go there, so I have to go to only 5 years. But now, anyway, so number 1 is I made it harder on myself than it had to be because I confused expense with expensive, specifically when it comes to staff. Number 2, and all of my answers, by the way, are all going to revolve around staff.
I get it. Yeah.
I could tell you a bunch of other things, but if you give me 3, it's all going to be around staff.
Yep.
Number 2, I confused management with coaching. For a long time, I confused management with coaching. Coaching is not a substitute for management. Employees, staff, they earn the right to get my coaching by doing the job that I hired them to do with excellence. If they don't do the job that I hired them to do with excellence, then they don't get coaching from me. They get management from me, where I say to them, this is what's expected, this is how it's expected, these are the tools and resources, this is the training, this is the job. And if you do the job, you get paid, you get the benefits, you get all the things that go with the job. And as a bonus, if you do the job very well, you'll also get coaching. And for many years, I made the mistake of thinking that I could coach someone because coaching feels better. Most lawyers like coaching people. We as lawyers tend to like to coach people. But management is a whole different thing. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is I'm going to stay with staffing, right? When my business was around $2 million in revenue, a group came and began talking about acquiring us. And we flew up to Philadelphia, we had lots of meetings, they gave us lots of great ideas, and it became clear that it just wasn't going to be a good cultural fit. But the owner of the company took me aside and gave me some really good advice, which it took me 5 more years to follow, which is stupid, but I did, right? And what he said is, you need to hire a full-time recruiter immediately. And of course, the price tag of hiring a full-time recruiter intimidated me because the business was only at $2 million. And he said, you need a full-time recruiter immediately because the difference between you growing this business to $20 million or $5 million in the next whatever years is going to be the superstars you put in place, and a recruiter is going to help you do that. I would just say to all the solos looking, do the math of hiring a recruiter, right? And we don't offer recruiting services, so I'm not trying to sell anyone recruiting services, but do the math. It is penny wise and pound stupid to try to save money on a recruiter. It makes zero financial sense to try to do the job of recruiting yourself. It's just the height of entrepreneurial immaturity to think that you're going to save money by doing the recruiting yourself. It makes no sense. It always pays to pay a recruiter to do that job. And then, of course, everyone always then says, well, great, can you refer a great recruiter to me? And unfortunately, the answer is no, because most of them suck. But I didn't say this was easy. I said it's worth it, right? Yeah. But a good recruiter is seriously worth their weight in gold. They really are.
I think I think my 3 would be similar, but a little bit different. Looking back, especially our marketing agency in particular, staff would have been the first. I wish I hired people sooner and faster.
Well, you buy your freedom.
That's exactly.
People think they're going to save money. What they don't understand is they're just keeping themselves in bondage by not hiring great people to liberate themselves.
Yep.
Every successful entrepreneur I know, regardless of industry, and certainly the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of 10, 20, $50 million law firm owners that I've helped them to build their businesses, they all share this as everyone's top 3 or top 5 is a little bit different, but this is in everyone's list of top 3 or top 5.
It's 100%. Like for me, it wasn't until I crossed $1 million in revenue that I was like, okay, now I can get an assistant. That was dumb.
That was so
that
stupid.
was dumb.
So dumb.
Looking
I
back.
wish I had known you then. I would have told you no now.
But obviously it's different now. I think the second for me would have been focusing on the urgent and not the important.
You focus too much on the urgent.
Like this has to be done now, that has to be done now, and this has to be done now. But it's like you're running from one fire to another, the context switching of one task to a different kind of task. It's hard to do so much of that. Like decision fatigue is a real thing during the day.
It is a real thing.
And doing too much of the urgent and not enough of the important. So if by having the staff that provided more opportunity for
that's the thing is
important.
like a lot of entrepreneurs, certainly a lot of small law firm owners, the endorphins, the adrenaline, the adrenaline rush from doing the urgent. Adrenaline is a drug. I mean, it literally becomes addictive.
Yep.
And they start getting addicted to doing all these urgent things all the time. And doing things that are important but not urgent, it doesn't give you the rush.
Yep.
I mean, this is one of the number one reasons why people come to work with How to Manage a Small Law Firm, and then we get them all the things that they said they wanted in life, and then you look at them 5 years later and they've like crashed and burned because they came and they said, I want more predictable income, I want more predictable profits, I want less stress, I want less drama, I want more control over my time. Magic wand, you got it. I mean, it's not like that, but as if it was. No, through some real work on their part, we help them make that happen. And then it's like, I'm not thrilled anymore. I'm not excited anymore. I'm not scared anymore. I don't have the rush anymore. And so they find a way to F it all up to keep things exciting and interesting. And they're trying, it's like that song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. They're looking for excitement in all the wrong places. You should not be looking for excitement inside your business. You should be looking for excitement with all the things your business empowers you to go take the profits, take the free time, take the resources your business gives you, and go do exciting things with it.
Yep.
All right, so your third thing.
My third thing would be I should have cut people from my life sooner.
And by your life, you mean your personal life.
Personal life, yeah, and
Yeah.
obviously some business, people as well, but personal life more than anything, because we've chatted about this a little bit before. There's two ways to build the tallest building in a town. You either work hard and you build the building and do all of the things that it takes, or you can just be another person. You can just tear the building down enough until yours is the biggest around. That takes a lot.
You mean tear everyone else's building.
down? Yeah. And there's a huge difference in that because.
I didn't have that experience.
I did.
You mean you were around people who were tearing everyone down?
Yeah.
Tried to tear you down?
Yeah, and not intentionally. Not but sometimes it's like, well, why would you do that? Like, why? In 2015, I had to work 320 days straight. Never took a day off because I had to fund the lawsuit and all the other sorts of things. Like, well, why don't you just take the day off? Or like, why don't you just do this thing? Or like, why don't you just it's going to be like, you'll figure it out, but like, you're just working too hard. Or all of the other things that people just didn't get it.
But were they trying to tear you down?
Well, that's a bad example, but I'm giving an example. I think the other element would be like, why are you doing something that's so uncertain? Creating businesses.
Entrepreneurs, we live a lonely life.
That's exactly it.
This is one of the things that I love so much about this community that we've built. And it is a rare and precious and profitable and very practical thing for an entrepreneur, whether they are the entrepreneur owner of a law firm or an insurance agency or whatever else it is, to get around other people who get it.
And I think that for me, I should have made some of those cuts. Or sometimes it's hard. Sometimes for me, it wasn't as much family, but you got close friends or people that are like, why would you put yourself out there? Or why would you do this? It's uncertain. And they don't get it, so there's a lack of support. The second element, I think, to that is there is a decent amount of people, or like a good amount of people out there that are insincere with your success. They say something to your face and they do something else behind you. So there's a level of you want people in your corner. So for me,
I don't have that experience.
So I did. So for me, there was a good amount of cuts that I had to make.
I have a different experience, but
well, yeah, and that's what I say. Everyone's different,
Yeah.
but I think for this, once I made those cuts, it was like I felt like a weight was removed.
Okay.
And for some people, that's it could be the spouse, it could be the friends, it could be the family, it could be whatever else. But that alleviated a decent amount. I was like, okay, I'm going down the right path. I think that was only validated though by what you just said, is by being around other people who are also going through it. In the thick of it, mastermind groups, connections, whatever the thing is, to have more people to actually relate to the struggle of being an entrepreneur.
What I experienced was friends and family who, look, the subconscious mind is a powerful thing, right?
Very much.
Mindset matters. And unsuccessful people, what almost all unsuccessful people have in common is they underestimate the importance of mindset. And you don't find very many very successful people who underestimate the importance of mindset. It's kind of interesting. And the sad irony of it is that all the mindset resources anyone could ever need are all available for free in a public library. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. Our subconscious mind tends to fear what's unfamiliar, right? If it's unfamiliar, it is by definition to your subconscious mind scary and therefore to be avoided.
Yep. Well, you have to think about your amygdala, which is that reptilian part of the brain. 10,000 years ago, if you were walking to a place that was dark, and it was a cave,
it was unfamiliar.
It could have been a bear or something. You had no idea.
Right.
Stay away.
Well, so think about it. We have the privilege of living amongst the 1%. Well, you know what that means is that 99% of the world's population is unfamiliar with what it really means to live the way we live, right? And they might say, well, I know someone who's wealthy, or I know someone who's successful, or I know someone who has 3 businesses or whatever. But to know them and to know them isn't the same thing. I might have met a billionaire, but I'm not a billionaire, but I might have met a billionaire. I have met people who are billionaires, but I don't presume to know them, right? They don't invite me in to their council. They don't they don't say, hey, why don't you sit at the dinner table when I'm arguing with my spouse or my kids about life. They don't say, these are my fears and my insecurities and my self-doubts. They don't say, these are the shadows and the echoes from my childhood and the things that still trigger me even though I'm a billionaire, right? 99% of the world's population, they just don't understand what it's like to have a 7-figure or multi-7-figure personal income. 99% of the world's population doesn't know what it's like to even have a 7-figure gross revenue. And what they end up doing is looking in from the outside and filling in a lot of gaps with stories and rumors and innuendos and assumptions. And so what I'm getting at with this whole story is my experience was different than your experience. My experience wasn't people trying to tear me down. My experience was people trying to protect me from the unknown.
Sure.
Trying to say, that's scary, that's unfamiliar, we don't understand that, we don't know how that works, and so therefore you shouldn't go try it. And I mean, now of course everyone thinks I'm a genius because, oh look, we always knew it was going to work. No, you didn't.
You're an overnight success.
I'm a 10-year overnight success.
Yeah.
No, but they look, I mean, you ask, is it easy? No, it's not easy. Is it worth it? Yes, it's worth it.
So what would be, if we're gearing this conversation more towards the solo.
Yeah.
So, I think our experience.
The person who's like completely solo, not even a virtual assistant.
Yes. And I think there's probably
That
elements.
was me. That was
me too.
So
not a solo attorney, but same sort of thing, like figuring it all out. I think there's elements from each of our backgrounds that they could probably relate to. But if we're talking about a solo attorney, not even an assistant, if you will,
mm-hmm.
what would be the 2 or 3 things that you would then say to that person to say, either the motivation, the hope, the mindset, the perspective of having worked with so many solos to either keep going or stay in the right direction, or a tidbit or something that could give them that I'm going down the right path.
Yeah, so one of my favorite quotes is by Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor.
Yep.
And you'd think that me saying it's my favorite quote, I should have it memorized, but I don't. I'm going to butcher it. But basically what he said was, if anything is within man's ability, know that it is within your ability too. Meaning, if any human being can do this, it means you can do it too. And I always found that enormously inspiring, because I would look around at people when I was broke and I was losing my house to foreclosure and I was scrounging for money to buy food. I would look around at people who were very successful, and I would say, okay, if they can do this, I can do this. Now I just need to figure out, what are they doing differently than me, right? And that, what are they doing differently than me, isn't the same thing as saying, what are they doing, right? Because the way a person does it isn't necessarily the way I'm going to do it.
Yep.
Right? I'm a unique individual, you're a unique individual, everyone watching this is a unique individual. So it's not a matter of copying or paint by numbers or do what I did. Because even if you tried to do even if you could do exactly what I did, I don't necessarily know what would work today. I mean, remember, I launched this business before the iPhone. I launched this business like YouTube was only 1 year old. Facebook was only 1 or 2 years old. I mean, there was
different times.
It was different times, right? So even if you could do exactly what I did, I don't know that it would work. So so what I'm saying is, I thought if they're doing it, if they're having success, I can have success. What are they doing differently than me? And what I mean by that is, how are they doing things? So how you think about what you think about is much more predictive of your success than what you think about.
Yep.
Right? How you do what you do is much more predictive of your success than what you do. And we all see it. I mean, you see people who they go to the gym the same number of hours as everyone else. They do the same exercises as everyone else. They do everything that everyone else does, and yet for some reason they don't get the results. Well, are they working out with the same intensity? Are they being as disciplined? Are they bringing the same energy to bear in whatever it is they're doing?
Their diet, even when they're not in the gym. I mean, there's 1,000 different things.
There's 1,000 different things. And we see this all the time with how to manage a small law firm. You get two different people. They both come through the virtual boot camp at the same time with the same facilitator. Their firms are, in every way you could imagine, materially the same. They appear to be materially the same in terms of resources and intelligence and everything else. And one of them, next thing you know, they got a $10 million firm. And the next one, next thing you know, they're online talking shit about how to manage doesn't work. How could this be, right? Well, because one of them went through with one way of thinking and the other one in with a different way of thinking. They both did the same things, right? But when the first one fell on her face, she thought to herself, okay, I've learned that I can fall on my face and survive. I've learned why I fell on my face. I'm going to figure out how to not fall on my face again. And she got back up and she kept going. And the other one fell on his face and he immediately looked for someone to blame. And then, applied this different way of thinking to the marketing, to the sales, to the selection of a marketing vendor, to the management of a marketing vendor, to the recruiting of a staff, to the management of a staff, to the communication with the staff when you're pleased or displeased with the way they're doing the work, and on and on and on and on and on. And how people who are successful do things is different from the way that unsuccessful people do things, even if they're doing the same things.
How you do anything is how you do everything. To a certain degree. I think for me, the elements that I would, encourage people on would be probably three things. There's a quote by Dr. David Hawkins that you either create and control your environment, or your environment creates and controls you. That's people. That's the people you surround yourself with. That's the physical environment. All of 100%. Those sorts of things. The second would be...
I never heard that quote, but I completely agree with that.
The second would be a quote from the French philosopher Alain de Botton that says, if you aren't embarrassed of who you were a year ago, you haven't grown enough.
Muhammad Ali. If I'm a person who is the same, if you're this, what does he say? A person who is the same at 50, the person who thinks the same way at 50 as they thought at 25 is a person who wasted 25 years of their life.
1,000%. So for me, oftentimes one of the things that's helped a lot is thinking through what would the future version of me do in this situation.
We just did an entire live quarterly meeting on that.
Did you?
The whole live quarterly meeting started off, it's January 1st, 4 years from now. You wake up, take inventory of everything you're grateful and happy about in your life and about your life. Now, what has to be true on December 31st for you to wake up on January 1st, 5 years from now, happy and grateful?
Yep.
And if that's going to be true on December 31st, 4 years from now, what has to be true on January 1st, 4 years from now? And you kind of work your way back. And I mean, causes lead to effects. When someone wakes up, broke and miserable, it didn't just happen. When someone wakes up happy and successful, it didn't just happen. people have, it's interesting, people have an easy time accepting that this dynamic works in reverse, but they don't have an easy time accepting that it works going forward. In other words, I've had this conversation with like, maybe not hundreds, but many dozens and dozens and dozens, maybe 100 law firm owners who like do different workshops and stuff. I've had this conversation where it's like, okay, if you were the owner of $1 million or 5 million or 10 million, whatever the number is that's like 10 times bigger than where their business is now, right? If you were the owner, I'll do this with you right now, all right? Whatever income you have, I'm not going to ask you on camera, but that number, multiply that by 10. You got the number? Okay. If you were living that life, what would that person have for dinner tonight?
You know what the answer is?
Yeah. What would that person have for dinner tonight?
It would be something that is, less or no alcohol. It would be something that is not, carbs or something like, external. It would be something like, a meat, vegetable, things that are healthy.
Okay, great. What would that person? How would that person get home? You're in Miami. You came to my office to do these.
Yep.
To do these podcasts, which I appreciate. Thank you for accommodating me.
Yeah.
You came to Miami. How would that person get home to Texas?
Either flying first class or private.
Which is it? How would that person get home?
Private.
Okay. How would that person get to the airstrip?
Limo or a
car
shuttle.
service.
Yeah, car service.
Okay. Who would make the travel arrangements for that person?
Assistant.
Okay. If you would start doing today every single thing that he would do, you would become him.
Yep.
Like within 90 days.
Yep. And that is something I wholeheartedly believe.
But most people don't.
Yeah.
Most people don't believe this. So I flip it around. Okay? Let's suppose that the goal was not to become a person with an income 10 times more than your income, with a happy family and a healthy body and all those kinds of good things that people have a hard time believing are so feasible.
Yeah.
And let's suppose, just for purposes of this exercise, that we decided that our goal was for you to become an alcoholic, 50 pounds overweight, with a miserable relationship. Do you have any doubt that you could set your mind to make that happen?
Oh, absolutely.
People have a real easy time believing they can drive their life into the ground, but they don't believe they can use the exact same dynamic, the exact same tools, the exact same methodology, the exact same approach to get their business, to get their life up, right? So if you wanted to become an alcoholic, what would you have for dinner tonight?
Just alcohol.
Lots of alcohol.
Yeah.
Lots of alcohol, lots of unhealthy food.
Yeah.
Right? And what would you have for breakfast tomorrow?
Alcohol. Bloody Mary to start the day off.
Maybe a Bloody Mary to start the day off, right? And if you want to have a happy relationship, if you want to wake up with a happy relationship 10 years from now, what would you do tonight? You'd probably call your wife, FaceTime your kids, tell them how much you miss them, tell them how much you love them, maybe write a little note and bring it home in your pocket or something for your wife, right? If you want to have a miserable relationship, what would you do? You'd probably
neglect them entirely.
Neglect them entirely, or call them and yell at them about something, right? The point I'm making is the same choices, the same way we control the choices we make. No one I've done this exercise with has any trouble believing that they have the power to make their life suck through a series of choices, consistent with a sucky life.
Yep.
But the idea that you can transform your life and have a much better life through a series of choices that are consistent with the better life, somehow they have a hard time believing this works in both directions, which goes back to 99% of the world's population, they just don't have the experience with this, right? Yeah. Look, you could wake up a year from now happy and grateful for an even more amazing life than you have today, or you could wake up a year from now miserable. And you have the power to choose. That was the quote you said, right?
Yeah.
What was the quote again?
If you're not embarrassed of who you were a year ago, you haven't grown enough.
No, the other one.
Your environment, you either create and control your environment, or your environment creates and controls you.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Right? But so many, and we're talking about law firm owners, so I'm just going to say so many small law firm owners, they treat their future as if it's at someone else's whim, as if someone else is controlling their future. They are the victim of circumstance.
Yeah. I think the
I wouldn't want to have a lawyer like that representing me, would you?
Hell no.
And then they wonder why they have a hard time with marketing when they go into the marketing with that mindset.
Well, I think that I agree with that entirely. I think that the perspective that was taught to me by a psychologist, longtime client, was, do you think that you're going to be a radically different person 10 years from now? The answer for you would be yes. For me, it would
I
be
hope
yes.
so.
But most people would say, well, no, like I'm going to be me, because they can't think that far into the future. But then if you flip it,
they won't think that far into the future.
But if you flip it and say, are you the same person you were 10 years ago?
No, of course not.
No one says.
We're saying the same thing.
It's exactly.
I love the way you just described it. We're saying, yeah.
And so it changes the perspective there on that, of being more future focused. And also, for me, it's tough running multiple businesses and people, all the things that, the elements of the day-to-day. Some days are better than others. But I come home and I'll walk through the door and my 3-year-old daughter will be like, Daddy. It'd be easy to stay in the pattern of like, and stay there versus having the future. Like, if I were to be 10 years from now or 20 years from now and come back to this moment right now,
right,
what would I pay? What would I give up to be present with her and enjoy that and not be whatever, thinking whatever else? So having more of that future pacing.
Yeah.
But the like, what would I pay? What would I have to give up in order to come back to this moment and actually like be present?
Yeah.
And it's a perspective thing, I think, too, that even when you're in the slog of it, you have to take account of the good things that are consistently happening to you, because that makes it easier to have little moments that you...
Well, serotonin, you actually can increase your serotonin levels,
Yep.
which reduces your anxiety just by taking inventory of what you're grateful for.
Yep.
So, it's kind of a funny story. I mean, it's funny because it's just funny for me, like just to think about this. I was invited to do a talk at the National Trial Lawyers Conference. That's where I was yesterday. That's why you had to come here, because I had to do that. I was invited to do that talk. And it was so funny because, that song, That One Guitar?
No.
Give me the phone. I think it's by Foreigner. You'll edit this? Through the magic of editing, this phone has now magically appeared in my hand because I did not have a encyclopedic recollection of the lyrics of Jukebox Hero. But here it is. Standing in the rain with his head hung low, couldn't get a ticket, it was a sold-out show. Heard the roar of the crowd. I literally get revved up and emotional when I hear this song, or when I think of this song. Heard the roar of the crowd. He could picture the scene. Put his ear to the wall, then like a distant scream. He heard one guitar, just blew him away. He saw stars in his eyes, and the very next day, bought a beat-up 6-string in a second-hand store. Didn't know how to play it, but he knew for sure. That one guitar felt good in his hands. Didn't take long to understand. Just one guitar, strung way down low. Was a one-way ticket, only one way to go. So he started rocking, ain't never gonna stop. Gotta keep on rocking, someday gonna make it to the top. And be a jukebox hero. Got stars in his eyes, he's a jukebox hero. He took one guitar, jukebox hero, stars in his eyes. In a town without a name, in a heavy downpour, thought he passed his own shadow by the backstage door. Like a trip through the past to that day in the rain, and that one guitar made his whole life change. Now he needs to keep on rocking. He just can't stop. Got to keep on rocking. That boy has got to stay on top and be a jukebox hero, got stars in his eyes. I had this moment. I'm in front of a couple hundred lawyers at the National Trials Lawyers Conference. I have a $30 million business. I'm going to pay off my mortgage later this week. Just write a check, pay off the mortgage. We have a 6-month waiting list for our premium services. I agreed to do the talk just because, Ken and Harlan asked me to, because why not? I've got nothing to sell. I got no point to make. And I'm starting to have like these flashbacks to the days 10 years ago when I was in front of hostile audiences and I was broke, and I was like, if I didn't make a sale, I was screwed. And I just had that moment of like gratitude. And I sat there just doing my exercises, my mindset exercises of taking inventory of all the things that I'm grateful for. And not things like the car, the house, the boat. I mean the things in terms of the choices that I've made in life, the choices that the 38-year-old version of myself made, the options that he gave me, the gift that he gave me. And I'm taking inventory of these things that I'm grateful for. And like literally, I'm not wearing my Oura ring right now because I jammed my finger in my... So I'm not wearing a wedding ring. My finger's all swollen up. But I was wearing my... And you could see my heart rate. Everything just started to... Just by doing these mindset exercises of gratitude. And I don't remember how I got into the sidetrack, but I felt like it was apropos to something you said.
No, it's funny. I went through literally the same experience last week. Last week was the 8-year anniversary of our lawsuit.
Wow.
And it was emotional. And just thinking about where we were 8 years ago and how difficult it was.
Wow.
But what a gift that it was. And I got like, it's difficult. I don't want to get too into it, but like it's a
For the people on camera, I can, you're like literally, your eyes are welling up.
Yeah.
Like I can feel, I can see it.
It's so it literally did the same thing. I can't believe, like, I've got the Tesla, I've got the Range Rover, I've got the house, I've got the ranch, I've got the things.
It's just stuff.
But it's just stuff. It's who I had to become as a result of it. And that would be probably one of the biggest things that if I hope anyone would take away from this conversation, if they're a solo attorney and they're in it, is like, it is worth it. And you just like, you may not know exactly the roadblocks or the things that are going to be placed in your way 1 year from now or 6 months from now, whatever it is, but it's worth it. Just keep going down your path, whatever the path is.
Have a reason, have a vision. Forget about goals.
Yeah.
Just have a reason and have a vision and have a commitment to keep going and going and going and going. And you might not get there, but you'll get somewhere.
Yep. And who you become along the way is
that's the best part.
The best part about it.
There's this movie called Papillon.
Yep.
And this is so freaking weird the way my mind works that puts this together. There's this scene where he's locked in a jail cell, like where there's no one around. What's it called?
He's like on the island, right?
Isolation.
Yeah.
Right? And I had this experience about 7 years ago and this is when we first started to finally kind of like get our shit together in the business. And I had this moment and I thought to myself, and this is, I should mention, before I had a child. So this changes everything. Right?
Yeah.
But I had this moment thinking to myself, if everything was taken away from me and I was locked in a jail cell, like in that movie, I could find contentment because I became the best version of myself that I had ever been up till then. And it's so amazing in business when you're not doing it for the stuff and you're really just doing it to see what you can do.
Your potential.
Just because I got to find out what I'm capable of. I got to find out what it's like.
It's like the quote, hell on earth would be the person you are meeting the person that you could have become.
Oh my God. I never heard that quote, but that's horrendous. It's just such a, I wish I've threatened to offer this service. I've threatened to offer this program. For years, I've threatened to offer this program. And my wife Allie, just, no, flat out, no way. But like, I would love to offer a service, offer a program where I allow a person or maybe a small group of people to literally just follow me around for 90 days, right? Have every breakfast with me for 90 days, have every lunch with me for 90 days, have every dinner with me for 90 days, go where I go, do what I do. You know, they would do what they do while I'm doing what I do. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And like, I would like buy the house next door and let them live there. I wouldn't let them live in my house, but they'd come over every day, you know, and just live in my reality. And it's like, if I could just give all of the struggling small law firm owners, entrepreneurs watching this, if they could just live in my reality for a month, I mean, they would never go back to the way it was.
Yep.
It would just...
Perspective would be changed for forever. You can never... Yeah, it's like once you stretch something to a point, it can never really
goes
return
back
to the reality.
Exactly,
that it was
the
previously.
expanded mind and all that. So yeah, I mean, we could talk about this forever, but I feel like
it's a good spot.
maybe a good spot to stop. And I saw that lunch has been delivered,
All right.
so it's definitely a good time to spot.
Yeah. So hopefully you got a lot of value out of this. Hopefully this is an off-the-cuff, slightly more, unscripted way that we've done some of these things previously. But if you're a solo attorney, small business owner, then we encourage you to just stay the path, whatever that path looks like for you. So all the best, and until next time.